Every bad habit begins long before the action itself happens. It usually starts with a moment, a feeling, or a situation that quietly pushes a person toward automatic behavior. Many people believe their habits control them, but in reality, habits follow patterns. The first step toward real change is learning to notice these patterns with honesty and awareness. Awareness means slowing down enough to observe yourself instead of acting on autopilot. Most bad habits operate unconsciously. A person reaches for their phone without thinking, overeats without realizing hunger was emotional rather than physical, procrastinates because of hidden fear, or reacts with anger before understanding what truly triggered the emotion. Triggers are the hidden starting points of habits. They can be emotional, environmental, social, or mental. Emotional triggers include stress, sadness, boredom, loneliness, anxiety, or even excitement. Environmental triggers might be certain places, specific times of day, or objects connected to past behavior. Social triggers appear when particular people or conversations influence actions. Mental triggers come from thoughts such as self-doubt, overthinking, or negative self-talk. When these triggers appear repeatedly, the brain learns to connect them with a familiar response, turning actions into habits. The brain naturally looks for comfort and efficiency. Once it discovers a behavior that provides temporary relief or pleasure, it remembers that shortcut. Over time, the habit becomes automatic because the brain wants to save energy. This is why people often say, I didn't even realize I was doing it. The action happens faster than conscious thought. Awareness interrupts this automatic cycle. Instead of reacting instantly, you begin to notice the moment between the trigger and the action. Developing awareness requires observation without judgment. Many people struggle because they criticize themselves the moment they recognize a bad habit. Self-criticism creates guilt, and guilt often pushes a person back toward the same habit for comfort. Awareness is not about blaming yourself, it is about understanding yourself. When you observe your behavior calmly, you begin to see connections you never noticed before. You may realize you scroll endlessly when you feel overwhelmed, snack when you feel bored, or avoid responsibilities when fear of failure appears. One powerful method of building awareness is pausing and asking simple questions whenever the urge appears. What am I feeling right now? What just happened before this urge started? Am I tired, stressed, or avoiding something important? These questions create mental distance between you and the habit. That small pause weakens automatic behavior and strengthens conscious choice. Even a few seconds of reflection can change the direction of your actions. Keeping track of habits also increases awareness. Writing down when the habit occurs, where you were, and what you felt helps reveal repeating patterns. Over a few days or weeks, patterns become clear. You might notice the habit appears at night when energy is low, after certain conversations, or during moments of boredom. This knowledge is powerful because once you recognize the trigger, you can prepare for it instead of being surprised by it. Awareness also involves recognizing internal dialogue. Many bad habits are fueled by thoughts such as, I deserve this, just one more time, or I'll stop tomorrow. These thoughts feel convincing because they appear familiar. By noticing these mental excuses, you begin to separate yourself from them. Thoughts are not commands. They are temporary mental events. Awareness teaches you to watch thoughts rather than automatically obey them. Another important part of awareness is understanding emotional avoidance. People often use habits to escape uncomfortable feelings instead of facing stress, sadness, or insecurity. The mind searches for distraction. The habit becomes a coping mechanism rather than the real problem. When you become aware of the emotion underneath the behavior, you start addressing the root cause instead of fighting the symptom. Recognizing that a habit is connected to an unmet emotional need changes the way you approach change. Instead of asking, how do I stop this? You begin asking, what am I truly needing right now? Mindfulness practices strengthen awareness by training attention. Simple actions like deep breathing, quiet reflection, or focused observation of daily activities help slow the mind. When attention improves, impulses lose their power because you notice them earlier. Awareness grows through repetition. The more often you observe your behavior, the easier it becomes to recognize triggers before the habit fully forms. Awareness also expands when you become honest about consequences. Many habits survive because the mind focuses only on short-term pleasure while ignoring long-term effects. Bringing conscious attention to how the habit affects your energy, confidence, relationships, and goals makes the reality clearer. This does not mean creating fear or shame. It means seeing the full picture. Honest awareness naturally reduces the attraction of harmful behaviors. Over time, awareness identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone controlled by habits, you begin seeing yourself as an observer capable of choice. This shift is powerful because habits lose strength when they are no longer invisible. You start recognizing early warning signs, the emotion rising, the thought forming, the urge building. Each moment of recognition gives you another opportunity to respond differently. The goal of awareness is not immediate perfection, but increasing consciousness. At first, you may notice the habit after it happens. Later, you recognize it during the action. Eventually, you notice the trigger before the action begins. This progression represents real growth. Awareness creates space between impulse and decision, and within that space lies freedom to choose a healthier response, understand personal patterns more deeply, and gradually take back control over behaviors that once felt automatic. Trying to eliminate a bad habit without replacing it often leads to frustration and relapse. The human brain is not designed to simply stop behaviors. It is designed to seek patterns that provide reward, comfort, or relief. Comfort or relief. Every habit exists because it fulfills a need, whether that need is emotional comfort, distraction, pleasure, or escape from stress. When a habit is removed without offering an alternative, the brain experiences a gap and immediately searches for another way to satisfy the same need. This is why people who try to quit habits through pure resistance often return to them or develop new unhealthy behaviors. A habit follows a simple cycle: trigger, action, and reward. The trigger starts the behavior, the action is the habit itself, and the reward is the feeling the brain receives afterward. The reward might be relaxation, entertainment, relief from anxiety, or a temporary sense of control. The brain remembers this reward and repeats the behavior whenever the same trigger appears. Understanding this cycle reveals an important truth. The real goal is not to destroy the habit, but to keep the reward while changing the action. Replacement works because it respects how the brain functions. Instead of fighting urges aggressively, you redirect them toward healthier responses. For example, if someone eats junk food when stressed, the real need may be comfort or emotional relief. Replacing the habit could involve drinking water, taking a short walk, stretching, or speaking with someone supportive. The emotional reward remains, but the behavior becomes constructive rather than harmful. Many people fail because they focus only on what they must stop instead of what they will start. Saying, "I will not do this anymore," creates tension and constant mental struggle. The brain interprets restriction as deprivation, which strengthens cravings. When a positive replacement exists, attention shifts toward growth rather than loss. The me and becomes occupied with a new action, making it easier to let go of the old one. Effective replacement habits should be simple, accessible, and immediately available when the urge appears. If the replacement requires too much effort, the brain will return to the familiar habit because it demands less energy. Small actions are more powerful than dramatic changes. Taking deep breaths instead of reacting with anger, writing thoughts instead of overthinking, or standing up and moving instead of endlessly scrolling can gradually reshape behavior patterns. Timing is also important. The replacement must happen at the exact moment the trigger occurs. Waiting too long allows the old habit to take control. Preparing in advance increases success. Knowing what action you will take when boredom, stress, or temptation appears removes uncertainty and strengthens self-control. Planning creates confidence because the decision has already been made before the urge arrives. Replacement habits should also provide some form of satisfaction. The brain needs a sense of reward to accept change. Healthy rewards might include a feeling of progress, physical movement, calmness, creativity, or accomplishment. Over time, the brain begins associating the new behavior with positive emotions, gradually weakening attachment to the old habit. Identity plays a role in successful replacement. Instead of seeing yourself as someone trying to quit a bad habit, begin seeing yourself as someone building better habits. This subtle shift changes motivation. Actions become aligned with the person you want to become rather than the behavior you are trying to escape. Each successful replacement reinforces a new self-image, strengthening long-term change. It is also helpful to expect discomfort in the beginning. Even with replacement, the brain may resist because familiarity feels safe. Urges may still appear strongly at first, but repetition teaches the brain that relief and satisfaction can come from healthier behaviors. Consistency rewires neural pathways, making the new response more automatic over time. Replacing habits is an act of redirection rather than denial. You are not suppressing desires. You are guiding them toward actions that support growth and well-being. With repeated practice, the replacement behavior becomes the new default response. gradually transforming daily routines, emotional reactions, and personal discipline while reducing reliance on harmful patterns that once felt impossible to escape. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to break bad habits is the desire for immediate transformation. Many individuals decide to change their lives overnight, setting unrealistic expectations that require drastic effort and perfect discipline from the very beginning. This approach often leads to exhaustion, disappointment, and eventual failure. Real and lasting change does not happen through sudden intensity, but through small, consistent actions repeated daily. The human brain adapts gradually, and habits strengthen through repetition rather than motivation alone. When people attempt to quit a habit completely in one moment, they rely heavily on willpower. Willpower, however, is limited and fluctuates depending on mood, energy, stress, and environment. On days when motivation is high, change feels easy, but when fatigue or emotional pressure appears, old behaviors quickly return. Small steps reduce dependence on motivation because they require less mental effort. Instead of demanding perfection, gradual progress allows change to become manageable and sustainable. Starting small means lowering the barrier to action. Rather than focusing on eliminating a habit entirely, begin by reducing its frequency or intensity. Someone who spends hours scrolling on their phone might first limit usage by 10 minutes. A person trying to wake earlier may start by adjusting sleep time slightly instead of forcing a dramatic schedule change. These minor adjustments may seem insignificant, but they create momentum. The brain begins to experience success, and success builds confidence. Consistency matters more than size. A tiny action repeated every day has greater impact than a large effort performed occasionally. The brain learns through repetition, forming neural pathways that strengthen each time a behavior occurs. When actions are small and consistent, they become automatic over time. This process revives behavior naturally without overwhelming the mind. Progress becomes stable rather than temporary. Small changes also reduce resistance. The brain often reacts negatively to drastic change because it interprets sudden disruption as a threat. Gradual improvement feels safer and more acceptable, allowing new behaviors to settle comfortably into daily routines. By moving step by step, you avoid triggering internal resistance that leads to procrastination or avoidance. Another advantage of starting small is the development of discipline through practice. Discipline is not an inborn trait, but a skill strengthened through repetition. Each time you follow through on a small commitment, you reinforce trust in yourself. Self-trust grows when promises to yourself are realistic and achievable. Repeated success changes how you view your own capabilities, replacing doubt with confidence. Tracking progress can strengthen consistency. Writing down daily efforts, no matter how small, helps visualize improvement. Seeing a record of continuous effort motivates persistence because progress becomes visible rather than abstract. Even imperfect days contribute to growth when consistency remains the focus. Missing one day does not erase progress. Retu. Warming quickly to the habit maintains momentum. Patience plays an essential role in gradual change. Modern culture often promotes instant results, but habits formed over months or years require time to reshape. Expecting immediate transformation creates frustration that leads many people to abandon their efforts too early. Accepting that progress is slow removes unnecessary pressure and allows growth to unfold naturally. Each small improvement accumulates quietly until significant change becomes noticeable. Consistency also builds emotional resilience. Repeating positive actions during difficult days strengthens mental stability. When behavior no longer depends on mood, habits become reliable. This reliability reduces internal conflict because decisions require less energy. Over time, actions feel natural rather than forced. Celebrating small victories reinforces motivation. Acknowledging progress releases positive emotions that encourage continuation. These victories do not need to be dramatic achievements. Completing a planned action, resisting an urge briefly, or choosing a healthier response counts as meaningful success. Recognition of progress keeps the mind focused on improvement instead of failure. Another important element is flexibility. Small steps allow adjustment when challenges arise. If progress slows, the action can be simplified rather than abandoned. Flexibility prevents discouragement because change adapts to real-life circumstances instead of collapsing under pressure. This adaptability makes long-term success more likely. Gradual change also reshapes identity. When small actions are repeated consistently, they influence how a person sees themselves. Instead of identifying as someone struggling with bad habits, individuals begin viewing themselves as disciplined, improving, and capable of growth. Identity transformation strengthens commitment B, because actions align with self-perception. The compound effect of small improvements becomes powerful over time. Just as negative habits accumulate slowly, positive habits grow through repeated effort. What feels minor today becomes meaningful tomorrow. Daily consistency builds stability, emotional control, and personal strength without overwhelming effort. Progress may appear slow in the beginning, but steady repetition reshapes routines, strengthens self-discipline, and creates lasting behavioral change through persistent, manageable action that gradually replaces old patterns and reinforces healthier choices. Many people believe that breaking bad habits depends mainly on strong willpower, but research and real-life experience show that environment plays a far greater role than motivation alone. Human behavior is deeply influenced by surroundings, and much of what people do every day is shaped by what they see, hear, and encounter repeatedly. Habits are often not a reflection of personal weakness, but a response to environmental cues that quietly guide actions. Changing the environment reduces the need for constant self-control and allows positive behavior to happen more naturally. The brain constantly absorbs information from its surroundings. Objects, sounds, locations, and even lighting conditions can act as signals that trigger automatic actions. A person may feel an urge to snack simply because food is visible on a table, reach for their phone because notifications appear on the screen, or procrastinate because their workspace encourages distraction. These actions feel like personal decisions, but they are often responses to environmental prompts learned over time. Recognizing this connection shifts the focus from blaming oneself to redesigning surroundings in a supportive way. Removing temptation is one of the most effective strategies for breaking bad habit. Says when harmful options remain easily accessible, the brain must repeatedly resist them, which drains mental energy. Every act of resistance consumes willpower, making it harder to stay disciplined throughout the day. By reducing exposure to triggers, you eliminate many internal battles before they begin. If unhealthy food is not nearby, overeating becomes less likely. If distracting applications are removed or hidden, excessive screen time decreases. The absence of temptation simplifies decision making. Environment also includes physical organization. A cluttered space often leads to a cluttered mind. Disorganization increases stress and encourages avoidance behaviors because tasks feel overwhelming. Creating a clean, structured environment promotes clarity and focus. Simple actions such as arranging a workspace, preparing necessary tools in advance, or organizing personal areas reduce friction between intention and action. When the environment supports productivity, positive habits require less effort. Designing an environment for success means making good habits easy and bad habits difficult. This principle works because humans naturally follow the path of least resistance. If exercising equipment is visible and accessible, movement becomes more likely. If books are placed within reach, reading becomes easier. If reminders of goals are present, motivation remains active. Small environmental adjustments gently guide behavior without requiring constant conscious effort. Social environmental plays an equally powerful role. The people around you influence attitudes, behaviors, and expectations. Spending time with individuals who encourage growth increases accountability and motivation. Conversely, environments filled with negativity or habits you are trying to leave behind can quietly pull you back into old patterns. Human beings naturally adapt to social norms often, mirroring behaviors they observe regularly. Choosing supportive relationships strengthens positive change because encouragement replaces pressure. Digital environments also shape habits in modern life. Phones, social media platforms, and online content are designed to capture attention and create repeated engagement. Notifications, endless scrolling features, and instant entertainment can reinforce distraction and reduce focus. Adjusting digital settings, limiting notifications, or creating technology-free periods allows mental space to recover. Controlling digital exposure helps regain attention and reduces unconscious engagement with harmful patterns. Another important aspect of environment is timing and routine. Certain habits are connected to specific times of day or recurring situations. Evening fatigue may trigger unhealthy behaviors, while stress after work might lead to avoidance or impulsive actions. Adjusting routines by introducing structured activities during vulnerable times can prevent habits from forming. Preparing healthier alternatives or planning meaningful activities during these periods interrupts automatic responses. Environmental change also supports emotional regulation. Spaces that feel calm, organized, and intentional reduce anxiety and promote mindfulness. Lighting, noise levels, and personal surroundings affect mood more than many people realize. Creating environments that promote relaxation, focus, or reflection encourages healthier emotional responses. When surroundings feel peaceful, the need for unhealthy coping mechanisms decreases. Preparation is another powerful environmental tool. When positive choices are prepared in advance, decision fatigue disappears. Prepared in advance, decision fatigue disappears. Prepared in meals, organizing schedules, or setting clear daily priorities reduces the likelihood of falling back into old habits during moments of stress or low energy. Preparati on transforms good intentions into practical action. Changing environment does not require dramatic transformation. Small adjustments often produce significant results. Moving an object, rearranging furniture, changing daily routes, or modifying routines can disrupt automatic behavior patterns. Each environmental shift creates an opportunity to respond differently and build new habits gradually. Over time, a supportive environment becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. Instead of constantly fighting temptation, behavior aligns naturally with goals. The environment begins to reinforce discipline automatically, reducing reliance on motivation alone. By intentionally shaping surroundings, you create conditions where positive habits feel easier, healthier choices become more natural, and personal growth is supported through daily interactions with spaces, routines, and influences that guide behavior toward lasting improvement. Self-discipline is often misunderstood as forcing yourself to resist temptation through sheer strength. In reality, discipline grows when you learn to manage impulses rather than fight them aggressively. Every bad habit begins with an urge, a sudden desire that feels urgent and powerful. These urges create the illusion that action must happen immediately. The mind convinces you that relief, pleasure, or comfort can only come if you respond right away. Learning to delay action breaks this illusion and weakens the automatic connection between desire and behavior. Urges are temporary emotional waves. They rise, peak, and eventually fade, whether you act on them or not. Most people never realize this because they respond instantly, reinforcing the habit cycle. When a craving appears and is immediately satisfied, the brain learns that acting quickly leads to reward. Over time, this strengthens impulsive behavior. Delaying action interrupts this learning process and teaches the brain that urges do not control decisions. The practice of delayed action begins with awareness of the moment an impulse appears. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause and create space between feeling and action. This pause does not need to be long. Even a few minutes can reduce the intensity of an urge. During this time, the brain shifts from emotional reaction to rational thinking. The initial rush of desire begins to weaken, allowing clearer judgment to emerge. One effective technique is the wait rule. When the urge arises, commit to waiting 5 or 10 minutes before deciding what to do. During this waiting period, focus on breathing slowly, changing physical posture, or briefly engaging in another activity. The goal is not distraction alone, but giving the emotional surge time to settle. Many urges lose their power simply because they were not acted upon immediately. Delayed action strengthens self-control gradually. Each time you successfully pause before reacting, you reinforce a new mental pathway. The brain learns that patience is possible and that impulses are not emergencies. This repeated experience builds confidence, making future urges easier to manage. Discipline becomes less about struggle and more about calm decision-making. Understanding the difference between craving and need also supports delayed action. Cravings often feel intense but are usually short-lived. Needs, on the other hand, remain steady and meaningful. By delaying action, you give yourself time to evaluate whether the urge represents a real necessity or a temporary emotional reaction. This distinction prevents impulsive decisions that later lead to regret. Physical movement can assist during moments of delay. Standing up, stretching, walking briefly, or drinking water signals a shift in attention. Movement changes brain chemistry and reduces emotional intensity, making it easier to resist immediate gratification. Small physical actions provide a constructive outlet while the urge fades naturally. Delayed action also reduces emotional dependence on habits. Many bad habits function as instant coping mechanisms for stress, boredom, or discomfort. When you delay responding, you begin tolerating uncomfortable emotions instead of escaping them. This builds emotional resilience. You learn that discomfort is temporary and manageable without relying on harmful behaviors. Another important B. Benefit of delay is improved decision quality. Actions taken during strong emotional states are often impulsive and misaligned with long-term goals. Pausing allows values and intentions to guide behavior instead of temporary feelings. Over time, decisions become more intentional and aligned with personal growth. Practicing delayed action does not mean suppressing emotions or denying desires completely. It means choosing the timing of your response rather than surrendering control. Sometimes after waiting, you may still decide to engage in the behavior, but the decision will be conscious rather than automatic. This shift alone weakens habitual patterns because awareness replaces impulsivity. Consistency is essential in building this skill. The first attempts may feel difficult because the brain is accustomed to instant reward. With repetition, however, waiting becomes easier. Urges feel less urgent, reactions slow down, and emotional balance improves. Discipline emerges not from harsh self-control, but from repeated moments of patience that gradually reshape how the mind responds to temptation and strengthen the ability to act thoughtfully rather than react automatically. Breaking bad habits is rarely a straight path. Many people begin with strong determination but become discouraged when they make mistakes along the way. They interpret a single slip as failure and assume they lack discipline or strength. This mindset often causes people to abandon progress entirely. True change requires patience and self-forgiveness because habits are deeply rooted patterns built over time. Expecting instant perfection creates unnecessary pressure that weakens motivation instead of strengthening it. Self-forgiveness plays a critical role in long-term transformation. When individuals respond to mistakes with harsh self-criticism, they create emotional stress that can actually reinforce the habit they are trying to leave behind. Feelings of guilt, shame, and disappointment often push people back toward familiar behaviors as a way to escape uncomfortable emotions. Forgiveness interrupts this cycle. It allows a person to acknowledge the mistake without attaching negative identity to it. A setback becomes an event, not a definition of who they are. Understanding that relapse is part of learning helps reduce fear of failure. The brain changes through repetition, and occasional mistakes provide valuable information about triggers, weaknesses, and emotional patterns. Each setback reveals something new about the habit. Instead of asking why you failed, it becomes more helpful to ask what you can learn from the experience. This perspective transforms mistakes into tools for growth rather than evidence of defeat. Patience is equally important because behavioral change happens gradually. Habits formed over years cannot disappear within days. Neural pathways in the brain strengthen through repetition, and replacing them requires consistent practice. Progress often feels slow at first, which can create frustration. However, small improvements accumulate quietly beneath the surface. Even when visible results seem minimal, internal change is taking place. Trusting the process allows growth to continue without constant doubt. Comparing yourself to others can weaken patience. Every individual's journey is different, shaped by unique experiences, environments, and emotional challenges. Measuring progress against someone else's success creates unrealistic expectations. Real improvement should be measured against your own past behavior. Noticing personal growth, even in small ways, reinforces confidence and strengthens commitment to change. Another aspect of patience involves accepting emotional fluctuations. Motivation naturally rises and falls. Some days feel easy, while others bring strong temptation or low energy. Expecting constant motivation sets an impossible standard. Instead, learning to continue small positive actions even during difficult moments builds resilience. Progress becomes independent of mood, allowing habits to stabilize over time. Self-compassion encourages persistence. Speaking to yourself with kindness rather than criticism creates a supportive inner environment. Encouraging thoughts such as acknowledging effort, recognizing improvement, and appreciating small victories promote emotional stability. When individuals feel safe from internal judgment, they are more willing to continue trying after setbacks. It is also helpful to focus on returning quickly after a mistake rather than aiming to avoid mistakes completely. The speed of recovery matters more than the absence of failure. Returning to positive behavior immediately prevents temporary slips from becoming long-term patterns. One difficult moment does not erase progress unless it leads to giving up entirely. Patience teaches acceptance of gradual transformation. Identity changes slowly as repeated positive actions reshape self-perception. Over time, individuals begin to see themselves as disciplined, resilient, and capable of growth. This identity shift strengthens motivation naturally because behavior aligns with self-belief rather than external pressure. Celebrating progress, no matter how small, reinforces patience. Recognizing effort builds momentum and reminds you that improvement is happening even when perfection has not been reached. Growth becomes a continuous journey rather than a final destination. Through forgiveness and patience, the struggle against bad habits becomes less about fighting oneself and more about sad. Understanding, learning, adapting, and steadily moving forward with compassion toward personal weaknesses while allowing lasting change to develop through consistent effort and emotional resilience.